Ellis, how difficult, been a whole lot of talk at media days and everything else about the targeting rule. And what they say is if they make a mistake, they're going to make the mistake in favor of throwing somebody out. How hard is that going to be to deal with?
We actually met with officials yesterday morning, excuse me, and got the interpretations on it. The general intent of the rule, I'm in favor of it, but my biggest fear is that if they keep bringing us down lower and lower, I think you're going to see knee injuries on offensive players and neck injuries on defensive players. The one thing I hope that it will stop is guys leaving their feet, launching, if you will, and going obviously to the head. But it's going to be, you know, the examples they showed us on film in the referee session the other day. A lot of times when the ball carrier or the defender, whomever is getting ready, you know, to be in the collision, they will naturally drop their hips or they drop their shoulders for the collisioning, and that brings the head down. And so a lot of these things are not intentional. And for that reason, I think it's like a lot of rules. Sometimes, you know, unintended consequences are brought along, and we are concerned about it because I think it could affect both sides of the ball, probably a little bit more on defense. But there's some blocks, you know, by downfield offensive players, and there's some blocks in the kicking game that were on those clips. And it was pretty obvious that the intent was not to hurt anybody or to launch toward the head. And it was still called because the collision was head-to-head. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see how it unfolds.
What do you tell your players?
Well, we're going to have to coach it. You know, some in particular, like the blind side hits, you're going to have to coach it to be more in a shielding attitude than an aggressive attacking attitude, and cut out on the old blind side type of hits. But the ones where you're trying to tackle somebody and you don't leave your feet, we're just going to have to deal with the consequences, I guess, if it occurs. But we've never coached anything like that, and I wouldn't coach anything like that. Some of them are very obvious. You can see it when sometimes they take a forearm up high, trying to go up above the shoulder pads, or when they leave their feet and lead with their head. But some of them, you know, guys are still on the ground running, and you see them kind of just turn. They don't even make the contact with their head, and the intent is not to hit the other guy's head, but they come into the chest area and it slides up on the head. And I just don't know how you take that out of football.
There's been a lot of talk this offseason about if hurry-up offenses lead to more injuries. You've had some comments about it in the past, and you've been coaching against it. What do you think of that stance?
I never looked at it from that viewpoint. The only things I feel is that, you know, to me, if both teams can get lined up, we'll find out who the best executing team is. If both teams are not lined up, then you find out who got there fastest, I guess. So to me, in some cases, it's not football. But I think when the referees are consistent, then the defense has no disadvantage. I think in the early years with the speed-up offenses, the officials, especially in the SEC, because you didn't see it very much, they weren't as good at the consistency of the mechanics. And I think they've gotten better. And probably we've gotten a little more accustomed to it, you know, on defense. So I don't see it as big of a problem as it used to be, and I've really never looked at it from that injury standpoint.
It's almost like a
safety.
Yeah, it's almost like an unwritten rule to allow like 12 seconds. You know, I know Gus wants to be able to go faster. I mean, what do you think of that? I mean, obviously, you want to catch the defense off.
Well, their intent is to go fast to get more plays and to challenge the other team in conditioning and mental toughness. I like all that. What I don't like is when the ball's snapped and one side's not lined up or the other. I've seen it snap so fast the offense didn't line up.
Right.
So I don't know what you're trying to prove there. But the pace to me is a part of the game, and I think it is good when you challenge somebody else from the conditioning and toughness standpoint. That's part of the game. So, you know, I don't know. I guess in an ideal world, I'd want a minimum 5 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever. When that ball's put on the ground, you will not snap it for 5 seconds. And if you can't get lined up by then, it's tough. You know, you can't get lined up.
Going back to the targeting rule, did you see the Clowney hit against Michigan this offseason?
Mm-hmm.
Two prominent figures, the SC coordinator, officials, and Mike Pierre said this week that that hit would have been cause for ejection under the new rule.
See, and that's one of them I'm talking about, and of course I hadn't looked at it probably a month or two, but there was no intent to go at someone's head. There was no intent to try to cause injury. And I think when they start taking it to the point that they're having to interpret it, then I just, you know, we're getting on, it's gonna be a slippery slope, I think.
Does that bother you that hit, which by a lot of people has been kind of lauded as a textbook tackle, a great example of how to tackle, could now be cause for ejection?
Yep. Now, had he come, you know, on a quarterback and you know, hit him or stuck him in with his hat or something of that nature, where it's something you obviously could not have helped. I mean, you obviously could have avoided, but what he did to me, I mean, this is a guy, he was stunning on that thing. That was a corner blitz with him running a slant stunt, and somebody turned him loose. And he hits a guy out a yard in the backfield. Within that much time, there's no ability for him to change his body. He can't get lower. You know, I don't see how that could be caused. And, you know, I don't know. It is a concern. Our whole staff was concerned about it, but you know, the referee's not the rules maker. They just deliver the message. Like he said, every rule put in the book is voted on by coaches.
With the punishment being so severe, you talked about in the spring that you're talking about ejections now for this. Do you see it as possible that, all right, you have a Clowney, but we'll put it to this team, to this defense, a Garrett or a Ford, that an offensive player would deliberately put themselves in the way to try and get one of your defenders ejected?
I don't think that's going to happen. What's going to happen is, with the speed of these guys and some of the things they're doing, I mean, they cannot control their body at certain times to move it 6 inches down or 6 inches over, et cetera. And to me, it's pretty obvious, and they got all these replay abilities, and every game we play is on TV. Well, that's part of the reason all this is coming about, the celebrations and all these other things, because they're on a microscope and national TV every week. But to me, you can tell when someone is trying to go to the head or not. You can almost, you see them sometime in the DBs, they leave their feet, you know, on a guy coming across on a crossing route or something of that nature. You know, but when two guys are running and both of them drop their center of gravity and the heads happen to hit, and neither one of them stuck their head in there intentionally, they just were on the same plane, I think we're getting in an area there where I don't know how you're going to avoid that kind of thing. And even a 15-yard penalty is enough, but throwing a kid out of a game, I think it is. You know, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, the rule's the rule, and it will be for 2 years also, because it's a 2-year rule cycle.
How tough is that going to be to swallow if you get an ejection, a penalty? They go back and say, well, it did not deserve an ejection, but you still had to suffer a penalty and maybe led to a game-winning touchdown. I mean,
yeah, I was surprised by that too. When they explain the rule, they're not going to take the 15 yards off, even if they decide it was not the correct call. But you can have a personal foul without an unsportsmanlike.